Breaking news. Breaking news. Arrest the cops who killed Breonna Taylor while she slept in her bed.
Hello and welcome to D.A.M.N News. I'm Brittany Leapart. Well, after a brief hiatus, we are back. So great to see your face. I've missed you so much. So much has happened since we last saw you because you know the craziness of 2020 stops for no one. So let's get right to it. Last Friday, the world lost an American civil rights icon, politician, good troublemaker, and all-around change agent. As I'm sure you've heard by now, John Lewis has passed away at the age of 80 after a 6-month battle with pancreatic cancer. And I'm sure you've seen all the tributes honoring him and his legacy, but who was John Lewis? Here are 10 fast facts. John Lewis was born on February 21st, 1940 in Troy, Alabama to sharecropper parents, and as a boy, he aspired to be a preacher. He drew inspiration by listening to a young minister named Martin Luther King on the radio and reading about the 1955 to 1956 Montgomery bus boycott. He wrote a letter to Dr. King, who sent him a round-trip bus ticket to visit him in Montgomery in 1958. Now, John Lewis was a founder and early leader of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which coordinated lunch counter sit-ins. He was among the original 13 freedom fighters, the black and white activists who challenged segregated interstate travel in the South in 1961. Lewis was one of the Big Six leaders of groups who organized the 1963 March on Washington, and at only 23 years old, he was the youngest speaker at the march, which is where MLK made his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. On March 7, 1965, John Lewis led one of the most famous marches in American history. In a sea of 600 people demanding the voting rights they had been denied, Mr. Lewis marched partway across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, into a waiting trap of state troopers in riot gear. This event became known as Bloody Sunday. A trooper cracked Mr. Lewis's skull with a billy club, knocking him to the ground, then hit him again when he tried to get up. Televised images of the beatings of Lewis and scores of others outraged the nation and stirred up support for the Voting Rights Act, which President Lyndon B. Johnson presented to a joint session of Congress 8 days later and signed into law on August 6. In 1968, he married Lillian Miles, a librarian, teacher, and former Peace Corps volunteer. She was outgoing and political and could quote Dr. King's speeches word for word. She was one of his closest political advisors. They had one son, John Miles Lewis, and Lillian died in 2012. Lewis served in the United States House of Representatives for Georgia's 5th Congressional District from 1987 until his death in 2020. He served for a whopping 17 terms. Due to his length of service, he became the dean of the Georgia Congressional Delegation. The district he represented includes the northern three-quarters of Atlanta. Mr. Lewis was arrested 40 times from 1960 to 1966. He was repeatedly beaten senseless by Southern policemen and freelance hoodlums. During the Freedom Rides in 1961, he was left unconscious in a pool of his own blood outside the Greyhound bus terminal in Montgomery, Alabama, after he and others were attacked by hundreds of white people. He spent countless days and nights in county jails and 31 days in Mississippi's notoriously brutal Parchman Penitentiary. As an adult, he said, after he met Dr. King and Rosa Parks, whose refusal to give up her bus seat to a white man was a flashpoint for the civil rights movement, he was inspired to get into trouble. Good trouble. Necessary trouble. We thank you, Representative John Lewis, for your senseless acts, countless acts of good, necessary trouble. And do you have one of these? Well, right now you might as well do this because it's basically not worth anything. Before the COVID-19 pandemic struck the world, the American passport was one of the most powerful passports in the world because you could travel almost anywhere. According to CNN Travel, a Japanese passport will give you access to 190 countries. A French passport will give you access to 188 countries. A U.S. passport will give you access to 185 countries. That's 185 countries out of 195 recognized nations around the world. But since America has been unable to get a handle on the spread of COVID-19 and the number of infections and deaths continue to rise, we are finding that other countries are leaving us off their list of countries allowed in. They're doing this to help stop the spread to their respective countries. Even as restrictions eased up in some places, Americans are still on the danger list. Earlier this month, the European Union omitted the United States from its list of 15 countries whose tourists are allowed to visit. Most of the Caribbean is open for U.S. tourists, but other countries aren't exactly welcoming U.S. travelers and making them take temperature checks and COVID-19 tests before they're allowing visitors to cross their borders for the first time since coronavirus shut down much of the world. So I'm going to show you a map where U.S. citizens are allowed to travel this summer. The green is open to U.S. citizens like Dominican Republic, Mexico, and Maldives. The yellow is open with restrictions like Aruba, Egypt, and Jamaica. And all that red, those are the countries closed to U.S. citizens, like the Bahamas. If you still choose to partake in international travel, be sure to check with the U.S. Embassy and the airline before finalizing your travel plans. And it's a bag of Doritos. It's a Rubik's Cube. It's a pot of flowers. Actually, it's none of that. It's cake. Optical illusion cakes are taking the internet by storm as they look like everything under the sun, but something you can actually eat. Check out these cakes by baker Luke Vincentini. Now, TikTok is full of challenges, and it seems a new one goes viral every day. One of the latest ones to become popular involves TikTokers jumping in a different pair of shoes to show the progression of a story. One couple decided to join the challenge by showing the evolution of their love story.
Say to you, I kinda wait to see you.
Oh, I'm not crying, you're crying. But don't you just love a good love story? And how small is too small for a car? Do you really need space for passengers and your belongings? Do you really need a roof on your car? I mean, as long as it gets you from point A to point B, that's all that really matters, right? In a time where minimization is proving fruitful, one driver is showing that as long as your car gets you to your destination, all the extra stuff isn't really needed.
I want y'all to see something real quick. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this mess here. Wait a minute. Where is he going? This man gonna get hit. Look at this. Look at this. Oh my God. Look at this right here. He from Illinois. Them Chicago plates. Oh my God. Look at this.
need one of those. But the way this Atlanta traffic is set up. Well, that's it for this week's show. We look forward to seeing you next week. Have a wonderful week. Bye.
Arrest the cops who killed Breonna Taylor